Hey everyone, welcome to Taking Flight. I'm Dr. Tom Lucas. I'm the program director for the Media Design MFA and the Instructional Design and Technology Master Science program here at Full Sail University. We have a really cool episode for you here. It's designing the story, creating immersive worlds, and I am joined by Theron Skees, who's the founder of the Designers Creative Studio, and boy, has Theron done a lot of different cool things. Hi, Theron.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's so great to be here. Hi, everybody.
So, I think we should just start with the beginning. I would really kind of like to hear your origin story, and as we sort of build it into what we're really talking about today.
Excellent. Well, hopefully everybody loves a good origin story. Mine starts in a family of builders, construction. That's kind of how I started, sweeping up on the building sites at 9 years old. But what really got me into this business is 1977. I was 10, standing in line for Star Wars, right? I think a lot of your audience might know it as New Hope.
It's the most important thing that happened in 1977.
It's true. It's really true. And I saw that movie over and over. It was so different. It was such a depiction of other worlds. And from that moment, I just decided I've got to be in film, and not on this side of the camera, but I've got to build these worlds. I need to build these creatures and create these places. And so that kind of started my pursuit and my passion for film. And graduated college. I did 2 years in a community college, got a associate of science degree, and I was just one of those, like a horse, right? You just couldn't slow me down. You couldn't keep me in the gates, and I just wanted to get into it so bad. So I never went back to school. Moved to Orlando. This was at a time in 1988. So if you remember what was going on in Orlando, it was Hollywood East.
Yeah.
Universal Studios was building, Disney was building their studios, and so I got into a lot of TV and commercials and movie and film, working on the construction side, as it were, scenic painter, set builder, sculptor, and from there I just started doing film work and kind of fell in love with it at first, right? Got to a crossroads on a film called Stargate with Kurt Russell.
Sure.
And it was probably those 6 weeks in the desert, and I started asking myself, why am I doing this? Is there something better? But I was disturbed with the fact that the coolest part of the film, I thought, was being on this set, right? It was so detailed, it was so amazing, and the people that actually got to enjoy the story of the film never saw it in that level. So I discovered the world of theme parks and sort of made this transition to Disney. Well, Universal first, then to Disney, and I just never looked back. It was about building worlds with the same level of detail as a film that stand for decades, right? These places and millions of people get to see that. So I just, that was kind of my quick story of how I kind of went from a kid who was just in love with movies, moving into the world of themed entertainment and building, sets, as it were, for real.
I get that though. I mean, when you look at your father being a builder and the fact that you are a builder of immersive experiences now, I actually see a pretty straight line in what was, I'm sure, a circuitous sort of career.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the other stops you've made along the way before we start really talking about what you're doing today?
Certainly. I love the connecting the dots that you did, because there's really something about having a plan of reading a document, a blueprint, something like that, and then putting in the effort. All these materials show up on a site, and you assemble them artfully into something that's usable and beautiful. And I think, hindsight, looking back to that, that's really what I learned the most from my growing up years, and I take that into the work that I do today. It just looks a little different. And so I appreciate the idea of starting with nothing, and then you end up with something that's usable and beautiful. And if we do it right, it has meaning and it serves mankind, and it does something really great, and it does something great for a long time. So that was really important to me. Along the way, that journey, as we were talking about previously, I didn't really spend a lot of time in academia. I think I was one of those kids that you would diagnose as ADHD. And I just wasn't patient enough for those lessons. I wanted to kind of curate my own learning, and I did that through a lot of hard work and many opportunities, and did some crazy things. Like I took a creature effects makeup class, and you learn all these things that you're not quite sure you're ever going to use in your career, but somehow you find a way to.
Makeup effects was one of the first things that interested me about film
Really?
production. Sure, Tom Savini, Stan
Yes.
Winston,
Yes.
like all these. I've read a
greats.
lot of issues of Fangoria.
Yes.
And Scholastic Books had a monster makeup like guide
Oh yeah,
or whatever.
yeah. That's right.
Do you,
That's right. Yes.
if you remember. So
Wow.
I can see why you might take that
Yeah.
class, and I'm sure it's helped you with what you're doing now.
Yeah.
So I think it would interest people to know that you spent a fair amount of time of your career working for Disney as an Imagineer. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about what that was like?
Absolutely. I know that there are many people probably in your audience, and certainly friends of mine, students, those in the next generation that are coming up, that really hold Disney Imagineering as sort of that's the dream job. So I really consider it a real honor to have been able to spend 23 years with the company. And even from my early days, I started as a what you would call a field art director. So that's somebody who's very familiar with construction, and you're working on site literally with all the contractors, but you're applying those construction materials in a real artful way. So that field I was in was called artificial rock work, believe it or not. So you go to Disney and you see all these mountains, and you see rocks, and you see things that are made of a material, and you think that there's something different. That was somebody like me who kind of did that. And then over time, I moved out of the field production and into design, and then from design very quickly into creative direction. And that was really my wheelhouse. And I think of creative direction very much like, although we were talking, I've never played an instrument before, but I look at it as a conductor of an orchestra. When you're a creative director on a project at Imagineering, there are so many different disciplines, specialties that are, many of them are very, very different from each other. So like members of an orchestra are playing different instruments, the conductor kind of brings them all together with a sheet of music, and everybody has to play their part and weave together their performance individually into a synergistic performance holistically, and that's where the experience comes. And I feel like that's kind of what I did for Disney for decades on theme parks, attractions, hotels. Disney Springs was a notable project of extreme complication. And then my last role was leading the Disney Cruise Line for 5 years. So I had the privilege of leading a team to design all the new ships that are coming out right now, and worked on the new island, Lighthouse Point. And so really, really neat stuff that I got to do there.
What were some of the qualities that you really had to foster in yourself to, be the lead designer, to be the art director, to be able to conduct that orchestra? Where did that come from?
That's a really great question. I think I was thrust into leadership roles very early in my career. The first role that I had with Disney was it was in Paris when it was called Euro Disneyland for those of us that remember.
Yeah.
Now it's called Disneyland Paris, but I did all the rock work at the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction. So one of my favorites. So it was a really great role. But I was thrown into a leadership role there right from the very beginning. And then my first real job at Imagineering, because I worked as a consultant for a while, they hired me as an art director for the Disney MGM Studios park. So in a sense, I was representing Imagineering and collaborating with the operations teams there every day. So I learned a lot by failing fast. I learned what worked and what didn't work. And I think for me, I really honed my leadership skills leading creative teams, which for anybody that's out there that's ever led creative teams before, it's a really hard job. Because if you creative people, and I'm one of them. If you lead them too tightly, right? You're trying to get production out of them and be here at this time, and you're really, tightly leading them. The production you get out of that creative team and the fidelity of that production oftentimes suffers. And then the exact inverse is true if you lead them too loosely and show up whenever you want. Oftentimes without parameters, we creatives tend to never finish, or we tend to just, I need to adjust. So it's this careful balance of implementing the vision, having people catch the vision and feel like they're a part of it, right? If somebody came to you or to me and said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do this exact thing, stay in this lane and don't deviate. I would probably be like, well, at least now in my career, I'd be like, nah, I'm not interested. So if you invite creatives to be a part of it, and in a sense, you say to them, we need your skills, your unique take on this, so that you're not just, stamping widgets, you're actually contributing to the whole, like the orchestra example I gave. I find that leadership becomes much easier and the resulting product is better. But even more important, the people that you're leading, they have more meaning in what they're doing and they want to stay with you. The retention is a lot better that way.
Sharing the vision, right?
Yeah.
I really like this analogy of the orchestra, because as an orchestra plays and they play together, the product of their collaboration is immediate.
Yeah.
So, the vision is very clear. And I promise we'll get to the more contemporary stuff in a minute. But
sure.
Another question that occurred to me is that in that role, of course, you're really propelling the vision of the project.
Yeah.
But you are doing that for, a corporate entity.
Right.
Right. You have to honor brand or perhaps certain personalities and budget and all that. So how do you navigate, taking the corporate vision or the employer's vision and then putting they've put you in that position because they trust that you're going to carry that vision through. So how do you navigate those waters?
It's a really great question, because I think when you're young in your career, and my experience is mostly creative, so it's probably true for most other fields as well. But I know when you're young creative, you have all this passion, all this horsepower and nowhere to, run. And when you first get a job, you tear into it. And the realities of a commercial world sometimes dampen your spirit, as a creative. So when you're a leader, and especially a senior executive leader in a company like Disney, I found myself sort of betwixt and between, right? And the one hand, you have to impart this vision, as we've talked, in kind of a pure way to your team, so that in a sense they're unburdened from a lot of that corporate pressure, red tape and 10 layers to get through to an approval. You really want them to work with criteria, but with criteria that drives the best product for the guest. At Disney, it's a very guest-centric, highly guest-focused, customer experience kind of corporation. So in my leadership, I really wanted my team focused on that, not focused on what one particular leader might say. So in that sense, I sort of served as that umbrella over the team, trying, not always being successful, but trying to kind of protect them from that day-to-day corporate stuff, and sort of shield them from that. And that takes a toll, because in one day you might be in a boardroom in a jacket and you're talking about $500 million of their money that you've been responsible to manage, and then the next minute you're in a design development session with 2 or 3 third parties, and then at the end of the day you're got a hard hat and boots and on a construction site all dirty. And so the ability to adapt is absolutely 100% critical for, at least for that role at Imagineering. I assume with others it's similar. and then having that ability to have to shift very, very quickly, be macro. In 1 minute, you're talking about, I've got 900 acres, and where does the hotel go? Where's the access road? And how do we remove trash? And then in the next meeting, you're talking about the finishes in one of the hotel rooms. And so I think over time, I just learned to be able to, expand and contract in that way, and be able to lead from those multiple positions.
Adaptability and vision are two big themes, I think, that we can take away from that. So let's talk about what you're doing now. So you're
Sure.
the founder of the Designers Creative Studio. So tell us about that.
Absolutely. That was my sort of passion project, right? So I started that in 2020 when the pandemic hit. Thousands of people affected, probably millions, I would say, all over the world. But many people were laid off, were furloughed, fired, lost their jobs. And I was one that got furloughed at Disney. And so 7 weeks sitting at home, right in the middle of $5 billion portfolio that I was in charge of at Disney, the cruise line. And it really gave me time to kind of say, look, this probably is going to end with me being laid off, even though there's still a decade of work to be done. I kind of like reading the writing on the wall. And it just, in a sense, looking back now, it was a blessing to have that time to just think, to unpack. What have I done in my career? Will it be meaningful to any other industry? Am I forever the, attractions person? Am I only relegated to theme park work, for the rest of my career? So that time gave me the ability to really, in an objective way, put my objective hat on and say, if I was looking at me from the outside, what skills would be usable? And so I really spent that time to sort of package myself and what I have done in my career in a way that could be usable by any segment of the global economy. And that wasn't me just hubris, right? It was like logically thinking, okay, well, this applies and I could use that, and that translates, this translates. And before long, your checklist is pretty full about how you could apply the knowledge that you've gained. So for me, I focused all of that in a company that I started called the Designers Creative Studio. And for me, it's a solopreneur. It's I expand and contract as needed. If I get a job where I need a bunch of experts, I have a curated network of global experts and friends and former colleagues I just am able to bring to bear and work in that way. So it's been amazing. It's been so much fun. I work to the degree that I want to work. If I like a project and it's a year long, focus on that. If I get invited to do a keynote, I go do that. If I speak at a university or a company, I go do that. So the flexibility just really works for me, and it's been a lot of fun. 5 years now. Can't believe it.
You had mentioned in a previous conversation that we had that when you were sort of at that crossroads, that you took an inventory of skills and then you tried to connect them to where they might apply.
Right.
I think a lot of our students here at Full Sail, when they're getting ready to enter the job market, they also kind of have to do that inventory, and they might not always remember what all their various skills are. Do you have any advice in terms of that for them?
I'm really glad you asked this question, because the advice that I like to give to students, especially because they're still formative, right? They're still kind of building all that layer cake that will eventually become, how they represent themselves to the job market. But I do like talking to new professionals and the next generation as well. And where I tend to focus my mentoring is in the area of soft skills. On your CV, of course, you've got a list. I use these programs. I've got this experience. Here's my degree. You have to list those things. But everybody else is going to list those things too, especially if you're looking for a role that's more niche and more specific. You're going to be up against many candidates that have maybe similar level experience or certainly do the same things. So the things that separate us as individuals in the workplace from others are things like emotional intelligence, empathy, our ability to compromise, our ability to listen, I really truly believe that is a superpower, because many of your audience have experienced this, right? Pausing and collecting your thoughts while somebody else is talking and you're thinking about what you're going to say next, that's not listening, right? Active listening is a really important skill that fully hears the person who's talking to you, and you interpret all of the things that they're saying and take them on board so that you can formulate the best response. Now, the response might be just conversation like we're having, or it might be a project brief. It might be a game. It might be a level of a game, might be, et cetera, a hotel. So I think those soft skills are super, super important. And one of the things I talk about a lot is the story of you in your resume, in your portfolio. That's what you should be telling. And the hard skills are only a part of that. Your soft skills, talking about how you work on a team, how you collaborate, how you negotiate. Nobody goes into a job, even if they're the senior, and just says, fist on the table, this is the way that it's going to be. It just doesn't work in the commercial world that way. So your ability to flow and adjust and adapt, and if you're creative, you need to have ideas on demand, right? Just drop a quarter in the ear and you're spitting out ideas, and that some people can't do that. And so building your ability to represent yourself that way, that would be my advice.
That's great. We'll shift gears again.
Sure.
When I was asking you, how should I introduce you? One of the things you said is you could just introduce me as a storyteller. So your career and your life really has been about story. So you're a designer of these immersive environments and experiences. So how do you create story through that, or how do you adapt? Because a lot of what you've done, right, is adapting existing IP, existing stories, and translating them into tangible, physical, sensory experiences. So tell us about storytelling, through environments.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because we were talking before, and that what I do is a little bit different, I think, than what the majority of your students will be doing. And that is, I build physical places most of the time, right? A destination. It's still an experience, but it's a destination. And those destinations are based on stories. The interesting thing about storytelling, especially right now in our world and in our culture, is it's a pretty hot topic, right? Don Miller, marketing firms, everybody's kind of focusing on story. But I like to say story only takes you so far unless that story can actually generate an experience. So then you ask yourself, well, what is the experience? And the practice that I do, I've called narrative experience design. And maybe I'll give you an example of how that works. So at Disney had a well-established brand, well-established range of IP. And when you tell stories, you're telling stories about the brand and about the IP. So about the IP in a branded way is probably a better way to say that. So there wasn't a huge amount of mystery, and it is a point of contention with a lot of Disney fans right now. Where's the original stories? Why aren't you, digging back into the days when you created stories like Pirates and those things? What's important is that at Disney, there's a whole treasure trove of stories that are waiting to be told. There's a story logic as to why all that would exist. In the corporate world, if you're talking about a corporate entity that maybe provides a service that doesn't even provide a hard product, I'm just using an example that I think would be difficult. How do you wrap story into that, Theron? And how would you generate an experience based on that story if you're providing a service? And what I would say is that most every company has a brand, and that brand really should be at the heart telling a story. Why do they exist, right? Simon Sinek start with why. And the why in the storytelling is the core meaning, right? We're a family brand. We believe in this, blah, 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 just as an example. So a brand, I seek to discover the core meaning, the core why within a brand, and then we develop a story around that brand. Now, it's not 10 pages long. It's not about characters. It is a way for me in an elevator to tell you about a brand in a way that elicits your connection. Wow, I didn't know that about them. That's really cool. We start thinking of brands like Apple or Amazon or Lululemon or something where they're more than just a product. People don't sleep outside of stores for an electronic device unless they really believe in the core brand story. So for me, I take that story, I create an experience, and I link the customers to the brand through the experience. So if all those stories are told based on the company's why, then those things are packed with meaning and they make an emotional connection through the experience to the brand. That's literally what Disney does. So in my exploration of what am I going to do with the rest of my life, that's kind of what I determined, is that we can extract storytelling, experiences that are designed with meaning and with emotion, and that is based on the brand. Well, what that does is it transforms customers into audience members. And that's what company wouldn't want that, right? Audience members come back over and over. Customers may buy once and may go to the competition. So that's kind of the sum total of how I think about storytelling, and then how I use it in today's world to help companies connect deeply with their customers.
That's great. Kind of to follow up with that, theme parks are a very easy way to explain what an immersive experience is like. Anyone who's gone to theme parks today, they've come a long way and continue to always push, technology forward. I would love to have a separate conversation with you in terms of how much technological innovation has occurred because you had a problem that you had to solve. So you had to figure out a way how to do it. Where might people encounter immersive experiences outside of the theme park realm? In maybe some of the work that you're doing now that you can talk about.
Sure. NDA handcuffs, right? Well, I think even the very word immersive is kind of, unfortunately, grown contentious in a sense, because it's sort of like the word theme park, right? Walt Disney, let's be clear, started a theme park, and it's a cohesive story from beginning to end. It's choreographed. Getting a steel roller coaster on sale and painting it purple and slapping Joker on it, and I'm not throwing shade, it's just an example. That's not really a Joker experience. Anybody that loves DC Comics would tell you that's not a Joker experience.
I don't know if I want to have one.
Yeah. I don't know if that's good.
Maybe Batman.
It could be good, but it just as an example.
Yeah, sure.
So, and I wouldn't really call that immersive, right? So immersive is where we started, and I think the definition of that is very, very broad now. Throwing up Van Gogh projections in an art museum, some people define that as immersive. Other people don't. I would define immersive as an experience that you have that has multiple layers and that connects with an individual through as many senses as you have as possible. Food is often difficult unless you're in a dining scenario. But not only does it connect with you in a sensory way, but it connects with you in a deep soul way, in a meaningful way, that you make this connection, that in a sense it transforms you in that way. That's kind of the closer feeling of immersion. And I think museums have done good jobs at this. You look at places like Meow Wolf, who've created these immersive experiences. And then you leaned into some of the things that I've been engaged in the last 3 or 4 years. I've done quite a lot of work in the Middle East. And what's significant about that work over there is that they are untethered by the heritage and history of the theme park and development world that we have here in the Western world. And because of that, they are pushing very hard into areas that have not existed before and leveraging technologies that either don't exist today or are just kind of emerging. And for creatives, that's really exciting because you're really pushing the boundaries on that. And I know there's a ton of contention around some of that work in the Middle East. I know that there's a lot of human rights issues that people think about when you think about those particular areas in the world. and they have some pay practices that other people, waiting months and months and months to get paid. But if you put all of that aside and you just think experientially, they're really on the cutting edge of that in a lot of ways. And I've been involved in some conceptual development over there that is super exciting. I hope that it gets built. I'm working in some ways right now with a particular client that I won't mention that I'm incredibly excited about. I mentioned to you before when we talked preliminarily that I don't do a lot of long projects, and this is one of the longest projects I've worked on with this individual, with this company, and I'm super excited about it. Where I think the industry is going, the future of, is really a convergence of multiple different industries in a sense, and I see that in a lot of ways conceptually playing out in different areas around the globe. And it's a bit of an arms race right now, I think, to see who can get there and really do it very, very well. And so I'm excited to be a part of that.
And this starts with learning how to hammer nails and pour concrete and paint sets. And one of the reasons why I was excited to have you in here today is that all the programs here at Full Sail and the students are in all these different disciplines, but every one of these disciplines is a part of designing these experiences.
Right.
And a student might be saying, well, I'm in film and it's a very two-dimensional world. What I'm putting is up on the screen and that's how I'm telling the story. But what Theron came in and talked about today sounds amazing. And I would love to figure out how I can get into that. So for students in all these different disciplines, what would be a great way for them to take a step in that direction?
I think that's incredibly exciting, because when students ask me, well, I do this, or I'm passionate about this, I'm learning this, is that a role that exists in themed entertainment? And I almost always say yes, because I think any formal discipline that you can think about, whether it's in film, whether it's in architecture, design, and construction, or whether it's in rides and engineering, programming, media, almost any role you can find in themed entertainment. And that's why I think it's very exciting. The world of themed experience design is massive. It's huge. And I think if you have an individual who's learning animation or VFX or game design or writing or film editing, anything you could kind of think up of the degree programs that you have here would absolutely transfer to the world of themed entertainment. Why would you be interested in that? I think what's really cool about that, and different from the mediums that those roles are normally associated with, is the permanency of it. When you actually build the world of Ubisoft Splinter Cell, I'm just making up an example.
Sure.
And you can walk into that world, you can play in that world, and you can do so in a way that has absolute story logic that aligns with the original intellectual property, and the experience aligns seamlessly. Actually, it's better because it's no longer two-dimensional. It's truly immersive. You're in it. Or take any number of examples, right? Assassin's Creed, you could, any film. There's something that you feel that's different. It's 100% different. I'm a gamer. I love gaming. Call of Duty, Nazi zombies, right? I love that. It's where I go to relax.
Okay.
But to go do that in real life in 3 dimensions, that would level up everything that I love about that game experience.
I'm playing Borderlands 3 right now. That would be
nice.
a fun, immersive
Nice.
experience
Yeah.
for sure. That's cool. Well, we still have some time before we go to Q&A. So you have a book that's come out, and I wanted to give you a little bit of time to talk about your book and maybe some other things that you're involved with.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. So my book is called Creating Memorable Worlds. It's a journey into themed entertainment design. So it's weighty, it's thick, it's 385 or so pages, and it really represents pretty much everything we've been talking about. And I wrote it to give students who are curating their knowledge, right? There's so many different places you can curate knowledge now, to give them an opportunity to see what themed experience design was really about, and building these destinations all over the world, these physical places. But also how all of the different roles that we've been talking about, all those different, I would say, tangential industries that are industries all to themselves, how they cross over and work within that world. How teams work together, what the processes are, the different people that work together. And my book really goes through all of that, working internationally, the different challenges with that, lots of different practical application and processes. And then the book culminates in chapter 9. It's called The Story of You. And the whole idea is to have readers do a self-evaluation. What am I passionate about? What would be the thing that I would want to do with my whole life? And some people have already figured that out, but it then takes you through how to use everything in the book to chart your own journey, right? Chart your own course for your career, and how to get the most meaning out of it. What people don't understand is once you make enough money to pay for your bills and all your kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs are met, it's not about money. They could throw money at you all day long, contrary to what people believe. It's about meaning. If you don't have meaning in what you do, then your life is really going to be hollow. So once you lock that career and you're in there and you've got 5, 6, 8, 10 games behind you, movies behind you, whatever role you're playing, it really becomes important you ask yourself the question, what is the meaning of what I do? So I try with my book to have readers think about that much, much earlier, before they get in and they've got a mortgage and 3 kids, and really start planning for that in their career.
It's really kind of the first book that covers the you'd used the phrase the other day when we were talking the experience economy, right? So there's not really any other books out there about designing full experiences in this way, right? You kind of wrote the book.
Wrote the book. There are other books that go into the industry, right? It's been the industry's been around for a long time, so there are many books that talk about aspects of it. I do believe mine's the only book that speaks in a very collective way about the whole entire process, from I always say from before the beginning until after the end, with a real focus on the reader's journey and about educating the reader. But I also take the perspective of the experience economy. It's the Pine and Gilmore book from the 90s, Harvard Press, a must-read for, I think, anybody who's alive today and working in any industry at all, because every single global segment of our economy, every segment of the global economy, really is focused on the economy of experiences. How do we create experiences? And one of the lines from the book that I love from Pine and Gilmore is they challenge business owners to think in terms of, look, if we charged admission for what we do, whether it's a service, a product, a commodity, whatever, if we stopped and we thought, if we charged admission, how would we change our business? That thought so profoundly impacted me, because that's what we do. Right? That's what we do in experience design. We would help a client, a business, think through, what would you do? Well, I got a lot of ideas on how you could change things. And your students, when they get out into the world, they'd have a lot of ideas about building experiences that could change the way customers experience products or services. And so that's kind of what my book leans into, is how to navigate your way from a design perspective. How do you actually think up and build commercially viable experiences in today's experience economy?
Would you say that a visit to the Apple Store is kind of tapping into that consumer immersive experience? Absolutely.
Apple's a company that's done very, very well in not just building a product that resonates with people. It becomes it's literally the first time I think a consumer electronic device has really become an extension of the human psyche. This is my phone. This is me. And then they've outdone themselves with service and outdone themselves with an actual place to shop for that device. And then their headquarters, right? everything about that is oozing customer experience and design with the customer in mind.
Good. I was hoping I was on the right track with that one. In media design, we tell the students that the whole world is a case study. That everything from the motion graphics on these screens to billboards on the street to whatever, everything's a case study in terms of design. For students that are now intrigued by what you do and what they might do within the industry, what are some tips for turning the world into a case study so they can be a little bit more aware and more plugged into what the actual work is?
Great question. One thing I'd like to go back in time and tell my younger self is, if you're going to be in design and that design is about creating an experience, you really have to understand human beings. And, there are people who design for animal programs and stuff, and that's really not what I'm talking about. Most of us design for human beings, whether that's a film experience, game experience, live sporting event, etc., a theme park. And the more that you understand your audience, the more you understand humans and how they perceive an experience, how they perceive the world, what they like, what they don't like, the better designer, creator that you'll be. Because you could have some really neat ideas, some really great technology, but if you don't understand the audience that you're building for, it may not resonate at all. And in the commercial world, they call that a failure. We all like to believe we're just in the art world, but we're actually in the design world, which means got to solve a problem, got to make money, got to have brand equity, got to level up. And I think that's really important. So that would be one of the very first things I would say. You have to listen. Don't just look at one form of media. Look at everything. Be inspired by automotive design. Be inspired by nature. Be inspired by fashion and architecture, print design, logo design, fontography, cinematography, movies, films, book. Let everything that human beings touch inspire you. Then you'll have a much better understanding of how to inspire them.
That's great. That's really cool. I just love how passionate you are about all of it. And it's no mystery to me how this has propelled you through a long career and now into a whole new phase. Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you were really hoping that we'd get around to in the conversation?
I actually didn't come with any kind of preconceived notions. As I said to you and your production team before, I love talking about this world. I feel so privileged and blessed to have been able to work in this world and to have so much meaning that I hope that by sharing aspects of it in forums like this, that I hope it influences people in a way to pursue the most meaning in their own lives, whatever they do, personal lives and as well as professional lives. I think the only other thing I would say is that don't lose sight of your personal life. We've talked a lot about professional life, very important. Most of us will work the majority of our lives, of the years of our life in a professional sense. But don't forget to balance the personal side of your life. And that's not just family, because family is defined in many different ways, but who are the people in your life that mean the most to you, that you respect the most, that you love? Who are those people that can tell you things that nobody else can, right? You need to make sure that you balance everything you do professionally with your personal world, so that it'll provide the foundation for you to be great in what you do in your professional world. And I think that's something we didn't catch on, and it has always been important to me. You'll know when you get it wrong and you're out of balance, and it doesn't take too many times in your life for that to happen to figure out, I got to get this balance to be good.
And also, too, if you're going to tell great stories in whatever medium or multiple mediums you choose, you have to go out and experience things
right on,
so that you can tell the story, right?
Absolutely.
All writing is observation. That's one of the old trite adages, but it's very true.
So true.
Write what you know, go out and live a little bit of it, and then
Absolutely.
So we're going to shift to Q&A.
Great.
And I think that we have a few. So who was your favorite creative lead you worked with at Walt Disney?
Wow, such an insightful question.
Sounds like they might know you.
It really puts me on the spot, especially if it's the individual I'm thinking about or not the individual. There's so many great people that I worked with at Imagineering. I would say quite a few of them stand out for different reasons, but I guess I would say probably Joe Rohde. Just where that came to mind. We're so focused on storytelling, and Joe is so passionate about telling stories and so knowledgeable about the art of storytelling, and the way that he approaches it is at the same time very, I don't know how, sorry, Joe, if you're listening, how to describe it, but very academic and very theoretical. But the application of it is so practical and so adaptable that teams that he leads can get right on board and be like, yeah, of course, this is the way we would do it.
He knows the science of it.
Yes.
What translates
Intimately.
that into.
Yeah, really great.
I
Good
love
question.
that. How can I move up from my position? If I start as a PA, how can I get an opportunity to move to the camera team, utility, or something else?
It's a really good question, and I would say that even though this is speaking of, I think, film specifically, the attitude that you have there, I think could translate to a lot, right? If you start as a graphic designer at Imagineering, how do I move up to be a creative director? And one of the things that I would say is never begrudge, $10 word, never begrudge where you start. You know, always embrace the place that you start. You mentioned PA. I swept floors, right? A lot of painting, the wall painting, not even art painting. And one of the things that you can do, very practical, is network. Meet as many people as you can wherever you are. If it's a studio, if it's a private production company, if you're on a production, meet as many people as you can and network with them and ask them questions, learn from them. Hey, how do you do this? Wow, that's so cool. I so respect you. How do you do that? You may run into some people who are jerks, don't talk to you.
Oh, that's the world.
That's the world. But keep asking. And one of the things I would say is that as you ask, as you learn, as you grow, as you network, you're growing yourself individually, but more importantly, you're growing your character and your integrity and how you represent yourself to others. Most of the jobs that I got in my life were because somebody else somewhere that I had spoken to at some time or worked with liked me, knew me, and said, hey, you should think about this guy, Theron. So if you can do that right where you are, summer program at Disney, working as an intern, you're going to be fine.
I was told early on to be reliable and fun to work with.
That's great.
And because people, although the entertainment industry is quite large in some ways, it's also quite small in that you see the same people work together over and over and over. And that's because they like being around each other.
Yeah.
It's exciting, and comfortable.
That's right. When you get the project lead, the director, the producer, whoever, whatever industry we're talking about, you want them to be thinking, I got to have Miriam, I got to have Scott, I need Sally on my project,
Doesn't even matter if they don't know exactly what it is that you need them to do, right? Because you know that it's teachable or trainable or they'll be enthusiastic.
That's right. I've had people connect with me on LinkedIn, for example. It's funny. They say, my whole network tells me that I should be connected to you. And that's like, wow, that's the highest compliment I think that you could get. And you get that by building those relationships.
Oh, that's outstanding. Okay, what advice would you give to an upcoming music composer who wants to create for all companies like Disney, Hollywood, Netflix, etc.?
Wow. One of the things that we were talking about was I do run into, because I'm a former Imagineer, I run into a lot of young professionals or students who are, that's their dream job. And they've got, if you looked at in their house and they had a dartboard of where they were, going to throw darts to work, the whole thing is Imagineering. It's just one myopic focus. And I would say this to the individual who wrote that question is, I think the same thing that I just said applies. Learn every single thing that you can about your degree field, your focus, no matter how tight the niche is, no matter how specialized. Learning about the breadth of the industry that you work in. How is a film made? You may only do the camera, you may only run the dolly or the grip, or you may be VFX or something like that. Learning the totality of that production process is really going to be helpful for you. Think of it as a map. That's what I say in my book. You may be a graphic designer in a cube, right, or a production assistant, and why would I need to learn about what the director of photography does, or the second unit or whatever? I'm telling you, the more that you learn about the field you work in, think of it as filling out the map of this region, this realm that you've never been to before, right? That's going to tell you how to navigate your career journey. And the more that you learn about others as a composer, the more that you learn about other composers, the more that you look at fringe composers and composers of today and composers of tomorrow, and the more that you investigate and learn and try things, and I think the more versatile you'll be. And then I would literally work anywhere. Anybody that's going to hire you as a composer, because you can build experience. And then when you go to Netflix, you'll be like, hey, I have these things and I have those things. And I would always keep knocking on the door, but I would keep working in every place that you can.
I don't think when Trent Reznor was starting a band in Cleveland, Ohio, that he was thinking that he would end up scoring so many films and so many TV shows, right?
Yeah, it's a great point.
That's awesome. Do you have any tips for people designing game environments over film or sets?
Wow, that's very interesting. Why it's interesting is I've recently, in the last 3 years, worked with a lot of game design professionals, just because without saying too much, my work demanded that, and it's given me a whole new understanding and respect of that world. Film design, I would first say that I think, not having done that, so don't want to misspeak about the profession, but I believe that you would need to know the overarching story narrative of the game, just like you would for a film. Film sets are, of course, built three-dimensionally, physically, even in places like The Mandalorian and other places where they're using the volume and they're filming against media. Having this cinematic, theatrical understanding of how to build a scene, I think, is equally as important if your sets are digital or if your sets are physical. Having that base level understanding, how is it going to be lit? How is the subject going to actually see these things? I think film and game design are very similar in that sense, simply because the design of the game is controlling what you see. Even in open world games, you have limits, right? You can't go everywhere. But it's certainly less restrictive than a film. The film takes you through that at the pace that the director wants an audience to see it, and only shows you the things that the director wants to see. Gaming, in a sense, is very similar to theme parks in that when you design a theme park, you can't control where the guest is going to go necessarily. We try. There's areas where you can't go.
Some guidance there. But.
Yeah, you don't want them running around in the Gravity building at Rock and Roller Coaster, right? That'd be kind of bad and dangerous. But in game design, you have to design it in a holistic way that the player can run all around and look at a whole bunch of things. Theme parks are really the same way. You have to think through that theatrically. How does the lighting still work from this angle and all of those things? So I think there's a lot of similarity.
Okay.
I hope that answered your question.
I'm 30 years old. I'm now just getting into the creative world of digital cinematography. What would be a good way to start my career on the right foot?
Wow. Well, good for you for jumping in. It's never too late. I don't know the world of digital cinematography with any relevance, but what I can say is about starting a career or changing a career. I have a professional coaching business, and I talk to a lot of students, and I talk to a lot of professionals that are, posing the same question or similar questions as this individual. I've been in this industry for a while. I'm pivoting. I'm doing something different. What's the best way to get started? I think I would say to this individual is to really know yourself, really know what you've done, what you're capable of, and never stop learning. Every single day should be a learning experience. Take all of that and pour it into what you do. Network like crazy. Build relationships with people. I know that you're probably used to, your audience is probably used to extroverts saying that. Build relationships, and And I should say I'm an extroverted introvert. I learned how to be extroverted. I'm not extroverted by nature. But so I say that as an example that it can be done. But building relationships is the most important part of any career. And I would say that to this individual.
I'm going to add something, even though I'm not a cinematographer, but as a writer, make things constantly, offer to help people make
That's
things,
yeah.
like just live it all the time. I couldn't go into a library or bookstore and not know that I have a writing project at home that I'm working on. I would somehow feel guilty or it would haunt me, so I have a personal library with a lot of books in it too, which is always motivating me.
Great advice.
Well, how do you document your creative thinking and process? How do you build in feedback as a part of that process?
Man, that's an insightful question.
Yeah.
Well, at Imagineering, we never had a real process that was, it's not on the lunchroom wall, first, second, and third. We generally followed what's known as AIA, the American Institute of Architects process, loosely, because there was so much more detailed than that. During a creative development process, I'm assuming it's very similar in film and very similar in game design, where you start in a very open-ended way with a story, and you start concepting or blue skying the journey of the character within the story or characters. What would your audience, your players, or your guests, if you're in a physical space, you journey that out. What would they do? How would they do it? What's the gameplay? What's the interactivity? And those things are documented in a very meticulous way. Creatively, you get art. In a story way you get written treatments. In a design way, you have design documentation, blueprints, etc., models, 3D models, fly-throughs. We do quite a lot of animatics, where you'll build something that's rough and kind of fly through it in a bunch of different ways. Lots of POVs, storyboards. So all of those same tools, they're really used kind of across all these industries. At the end of the project, at least in my world, you have a physical building or a collection of physical buildings that have air conditioning and telecommunications and plumbing, and all of that is documented in the way that you would imagine and kept on file. And I would imagine for game design and things, it's all kept in the raw files and the what do they call that? The ligatures or the framework for characters and everything that turns around. So I think we document in a very same way as that. What is different is the process to get there. I find is different, and a lot of companies practice it different, and I'm assuming in industries they go through a process that's different
and individual to the project too.
True,
right?
That's right. Yeah, the way you would design a ship is different than the way you design a hotel. Similar stops along the journey. Yeah. Some aren't needed. You don't need ride design in a hotel. You don't need audio animatronics, for example. I'm thinking theme park world. So those don't come in play. But if you're in an attraction, you do. Thankfully, you don't need nautical design in an attraction because you'd never get it built.
We have a couple more questions. What is the role that soundscapes have played in your career, and what is your research process?
Wow, two very different questions, I think, baked in there. Soundscapes are absolutely crucial, a crucial part of it. Not just what we would call background music, and there's background and foreground music is the way that we would call it. So background is the ambient beat that just brings the environment that takes place in, brings it to life. Foreground music is a concert, right? It's lyrics. It's you're engaged with a performance, and typically in theme parks and environmental design, you really wouldn't use that. Then you said soundscapes, and I would consider that a combination of background music and sound effects. So sound effects are very important because it, again, like in a film or a game, it brings to life those actions by characters or propels the story forward in a specific way. Research that we do oftentimes happens before even the written narrative or written story would even come into place. In the world of theme parks, if you're building a real place, a place that exists in the world, well, you go to that place and you document it like Joe Rohde did for...
What does it sound like?
Yeah, exactly.
How do you feel when you're in that environment?
Exactly. Right? Expedition Everest was the point that I was going to give.
Okay.
That, I mean, Joe went and climbed in the Himalaya mountains and, learned about the Yeti there. So research is critical, not just in sound, but in color theory and materiality and forms and spatial design. All become really, really important. And game designers will know that too. You can't go back and do a World War I game or World War II game unless you really have the uniforms, the weapons, the trenches, all those things. So that comes through research.
Amazing. Okay. That's all the time that we have for this episode of Taking Flight. Theron, thank you so much for joining us. It was
pleasure.
An amazing conversation.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much. And thanks to your audience for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next month with another exciting episode of Taking Flight. Take care.